On this episode of AV Week, directing design decisions through data, securing AV devices, and looking at the very first Dante AV devices that have been released. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 515, recorded Thursday, July 1st, 2021. Software first.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Extron, industry-leading technology backed by world-class support.
And by Vadio, a leading manufacturer of professional PTZ cameras, Pro AV solutions, and UCC integration systems. And by
Sennheiser. For over 75 years, Sennheiser has been a leader in pro audio and is now offering a wide variety of touchless and traditional audio solutions
This is
for both
AV
corporate
Week,
and educational
audio,
campus-wide
news and
audio.
information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week. We're recording this right before the U.S. celebrates 4th of July, so I figured I'd give myself a vacation today. We have three talkers. So my name is Tim, and the rest of these folks are going to take it from here. First and foremost, from Parts Unknown, Dawn Mead. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks so much for having me, as usual, Tim.
We say Parts Unknown because technically Dawn is is a technology manager, AV technology manager, and she works for a company that we can't say who they work for.
I'm in an undisclosed location in the greater Baltimore, Northern Virginia area.
That was even closer than I was going to do. I was just going to do east on the East Coast.
You know, the DMV, got to represent.
There we go. Well, basically her neighbor, Nyree Hollingsworth. Nyree, can we say where you work?
Sure. I work for the MITRE Corporation.
All right, there you go. Also in the Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. And with us from the western portion of the United States, my good friend Christy Mitchell from Surgex. Welcome, ma'am.
Hi, welcome. I mean, not welcome to you, but hello, everyone.
How are you? We say the western parts of the U.S. Christy is out of Denver, which I think right now you're in California though, so you're way west.
Actually, I'm in Arizona. California's next. Just being in person and seeing people again is fantastic. It feels like I'm actually doing my job.
I know, it's crazy.
What a miracle.
We're getting ready. We're actually already we're starting to prep for InfoComm certainly, but also really in earnest CEDIA. We'll be going to CEDIA the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of September. Actually, you can join us if you'd like in Indianapolis. We are doing a party, an event with the IMCCA, Poly, our buddy Mr. David Danto, and Chris Netto is actually going to get out of New Jersey. According to Mr. Netto, he says that's his first trip after the pandemic. So that'll be kind of exciting. So if you're not doing anything the first week of September and you want to go over to Indy, come join us. So yeah, hang out. First story comes to us from our friends over at SCN and AV Network. The very first Dante AV products are available from both Bolin Technology and Patent Electronics. They've released Dante AV over IP products that can run on a 1 gig network. This is a year and a half after Audinate first unveiled the chip design. That was roughly the ISE 2020 when Dante unveiled that. Bolin has the Dante AV PTZ cameras. Those start at roughly $2,500 MSRP. Patent has also released Dante AV encoders and decoders. Couldn't find an MSRP on their website or any of the documentation. Don, we're going to start with you on this. We're looking at AV over IP in general. How viable is that technology overarching, right? The overarching AV over IP as we kind of head back to work and we start looking at more hybrid systems and we start looking at more converting huddle spaces into mini hoteling spaces. AV over IP, how viable is that still in the office?
So I have to temper my answer by saying kind of, because it depends what your office is or who you're working for. In the vast majority of the corporate world, if you take at least very minimal precautions, there shouldn't be a massive issue with putting your AV over the IP network, with working with the IT team to get your signals where they need to be. For certain verticals, especially here in this particular part of the country, there is a lot more security required before you can put anything on the network, whether it's Dante, whether it's TSN, whether it's whatever flavor of AV over IP you're looking at. It's got to go through a huge vetting process. And even then, 99% of the time, at least in my company, you have to build a separate AV IP network, sort of parallel to the company's network. So for the vast majority of those listening, for home theater, for regular corporate, nonprofit, your general verticals, absolutely. AV over IP is fantastic. Gives you distance, gives you easier connectivity. People understand, oh, it looks like a network wire. It's going to make the signal go. It's not all these wacky AV specific standards. But for some verticals, banks, anything with money, casinos, military, defense, aerospace, and even possibly some of the hospital verticals with the HIPAA requirements and such.
All right. One of those unique connectors is our buddy Mr. Mark Coxon's favorite in the world, HDMI. Nairi, when it comes to this, Dante's unveiled this. Is a very interesting move by them, their part. We thought so a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. Where does Dante fit in this? Right, we've watched for years, and our good friends at AVB, God love them, they're still trying. But you've got the folks from Crestron to Extron, both of which are sponsors of AVNation. You've got the folks at Biamp who does use AVB. You've got SDVOE. You've got HG base T that has some sort of they don't quite have the over the network, but they've got point to point. Dante comes into this, one could argue rather late, but where do they fit in this field?
Well, I mean, so yeah, like you said, you take the alphabet soup, you pick one, that's the one you use in your organization. I really don't recommend mixing and matching in that regard. But definitely once you make that choice, you kind of, you're stuck with them for at least that next product generation as it comes out. So be that as it may, I think there is a place for it. It's interesting because Dante doesn't necessarily make products. So, having the technology licensed in other products, we'll see how that fleshes out. Obviously, we're seeing the Dante audio piece being adopted by just about everyone, that has skin in that game. The video piece is going to be a little bit more interesting. Where it comes to play, and going back to what Don was discussing, I think as we look at how offices are built, structured, remodeled, so to speak, to deal with our next normal, as people in my organization like to say, space is going to be at a premium. And to the extent that we can consolidate some of this equipment in smaller spaces and use category cables to distribute them throughout the facility, I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the advantage and the bang for the buck in these technologies, because otherwise it's just, a regular XLR cable can do just the same thing in that same room. But obviously, if you wanted to cross some distance, you got to do some encoding, decoding, and other things with it. So I think that's where it's going to really see itself kind of be an advantage in the marketplace by allowing integrators to generate some space savings as they build, I would say more sophisticated solutions for certain organizations.
Nairi, you mentioned that you don't necessarily want to mix and match the alphabet soups, and that certainly is true. That is the argument, though, that SDVOE would make, is the fact that, we're a standard. We can argue about the fact that they're a privately held company and standards like that. Same thing with HD-based T. There's the fact, and Audinate is as well. I don't want to make any judgments there. Audinate is as well. They're a privately held corporation based in Australia. Does the fact, though, that you mentioned the fact that Dante is pretty much accepted by darn near every audio manufacturer, does that give the mix and match and Dante an advantage then over other alphabet soups that are manufacturer specific?
Absolutely, because my biggest criteria when assessing which product that I'm going to choose is how does it manage the AV sync? And so to the extent that they have them both in the same place, obviously that makes life a lot easier. And so those, as you get closer, because, the way that I look at this, a lot of these changes are very much on the margins. There's not a whole lot of difference between the different technologies in terms of how they do it and what they're actually doing behind the scenes. So it's how much bandwidth are you going to be consuming on the network? How are you going to be managing AV sync? And can you deliver across the distances that you claim that you are able to deliver across? And, those are the evaluation criteria. Those that meet those criteria are products that I'm going to buy. Those that don't, we'll be looking for others to kind of outfit our solutions.
All right. Christy, as you're talking to dealers and their customers as well, where do you see this headed? Is this, I mentioned the fact that Dante is entering a rather crowded field. I guess I'm going to ask a really direct question here: is where do you see kind of this overarching battle going? Are we going to see more and more folks, or is this kind of like the crest here before some folks are going to start falling by the wayside when it comes to market share and technology?
Every time that I go in for a meeting, I ask this question, actually, because we're reaching an impasse where AV and IT are colliding, and a lot would argue that AV will fall up under IT, but IT doesn't. They're great, but they don't know AV. So we're two separate fields, kind of being pushed into one direction. So it's an interesting topic to talk about AV over IP, because that's just one piece of a bigger picture. And when I talk to the guys about this, guys and gals, about this, they say, look, this is what it is. Eventually, this is going to be our new normal, right? I think that Dante's got a great play. I think that, in an alphabet soup full of options, what's one more? and, and on top of that, just speaking from a manufacturer perspective, we've just launched a product that has IP connectivity. And to echo Don's point about where those products align, yes, we're going to have some issues in healthcare and anywhere with a lot of requirements, enterprise banks, financial institutions. But if we get it right with the security, with the encryption, so for example, Squid has 802.1x, which is the highest level of security protection that you could have for a commodity, a hardware product. If we get that right, and like you said, like Don said, if we're hanging these things on a separate AV network, everybody wins. It's good for everybody. And from the perspective of having things on the network, we're able to log into those devices and remotely monitor them. So if we've got eyes where we don't have to be there rolling a truck, we can be so much more proactive in solving problems, even before facilities managers even see them. So I think it's a positive play, just in general, and one more step closer to what this whole new world's going to look like with AV and IT.
Thanks so much for watching this first segment of AV Week. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below or go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.